We're working through the book of Hebrews this week, or this month, these 2 months. The first 2 months of the year, we looked at God the Father and asked, who is God the Father in the book of John? What does Jesus reveal, and how does he invite us to relate to him? The big ministry of Jesus, connecting us to the Father. The second 2 months, we were second last in the series. We're looking at the book of Hebrews, and we're asking the question, who is Jesus? And how are we invited to relate to him personally? Not just what has he come to do for us, but how do we relate to him? And this morning we're looking at Hebrews chapter 12. We're at the practical bit in the book. In chapter 10, we started moving from orthodoxy, from right belief, to orthopraxy, right way of living. There's a verse, like in all Paul's letters, this one has the same therefore. He's saying, this has been the truth about who Jesus is, and now therefore, how do we live? How should I live? Philippians chapter 3, Ephesians chapter 4, Galatians chapter 3. Everyone has a therefore. And Hebrews chapter 10 said, therefore, let us keep on hoping. Let us hold on to faith, and let us consider how to stir one another, not neglecting the assembly of the saints. So in Hebrews here, we're moving to Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. Just before I do that, I'm looking at Dale this morning, and I thought I'm going to play a bit of game. You know, Dale is one of... Yeah. He loves being put on the spot. He loves it. You don't have to do anything. So I've known Dale. We were students together, and we went on outreaches together when we were students 25 years ago. 1999 was the first time we went on a mission together in our third years. Well, my second third year, his first third year. He only had one. But my final year was the best 2 years of my life. It was amazing. Anyway, but looking at how Dale grew in faith in Jesus, I was thinking, the two of us growing next to each other in this amazing way. I was thinking we all have holes in our theology, but if you were to consider Dale and myself, Dale preaches really well. But if you consider Dale and myself, all of us have holes in our theology, but who of the two of us do you think has the more proper view in the knowledge of God? Don't raise your hands now. Don't raise your hands now. But we have to acknowledge that all of us see in part, but who do you think sees more? Dale or myself? It's like, if you were to think, Dale is one of the most intelligent people and good preachers. He thinks before he speaks. I think as I speak, nah? But, I've studied a bit of theology. He as well, but I've studied a bit of theology, nah? Thinking, it's not just about godliness, it's not just about right belief, but it's also about right love. Who between the two of you, if you had a severe sin, if you have a friend who messed up, and you have to speak to someone, who will you probably speak to? Me or Dale? Who is the kindest? Who is the most gracious between the two of us? Yeah, we all love in part. Yeah, shh. Don't scream that out. I think I've stood up and I shared a fair share of my failures, and Dale's known that there was once in his life that he failed as well. For a season in his life. Who would you feel, who's more loving, Who has God's love in their heart more? Me or Dale, And then in terms of an example of life, Dale has 3 amazing children, and they are a bit older, and you have adopted a fourth one. The fourth one, 3 and then the fourth one. It's amazing. He is an example of godliness, and his children obviously are, but have you seen Nathan and Marguerite? It's just, we have 2, and it's shorter. Our kids are a good 6 years younger, 8 years younger than his oldest. So I've not grown. But who do you think is a better example of godliness? Dale or myself? I hope you see the stupidity of this conversation. It's the point, no? It's stupid. It's stupid. We do this. It's silly that we come to church. For God's sake, I know that you didn't come to look at me this morning. I mean, if you were, you're going to be let down. You're going to be let down. Ask my wife. You're going to be let down. Eh? Even if Dale the Great would stand here and preach every week, you might also be let down. Like, I don't know. I don't know that, but God knows. He sees your flaws. But our culture is so stupid. I mean, our Christian culture is so silly. We've got the celebrity culture in the world where we follow people and we follow after people and we compare people. And that comparative culture has crept into our church. Of course, we do this. So we've got like, who's the greatest worship leader? I mean, Dale or Greg? That is a good question. That is a good question. But it's still silly. It's still stupid. You know, who has the better sermons? Who is more filled with the power? Who should I go to who has more power in the pulpit? I mean, in preaching or with the power of healing or with... It's just stupid. It's just dumb. And this week on Thursday night we were here because there's a series out in Showmax. We invited the church to come, and there will be a bunch of people here this Thursday evening. And we just looked at the Illuminated series. I mean, it's a series on cults in South Africa, mostly Christian cults, but a few secular belief systems. And it's just, you look at it and you go like, well, the biggest issue, the biggest error is the fact that we make too much of a person or a group of people, a system of people. That is the number one trap. I will follow you. It's true. We are all disciples of something. We all follow after something because this person or this group has the great truth, the great key to having a great life. Whether it's your transformational coach, whether it's your university professor, whether it's Simon Sinek, or whether it is Jesus the Christ. We all follow after someone. I want to emulate you. I want to learn from you. You've got the way. Tell me how to live so I can get it right. Tell me what is the best way to live. Give me wisdom. Give me insight. Give me truth. And the fact is that we all do this comparative thing. So Hebrews chapter 11, the author of Hebrews, the thrust of the letter of the Hebrews, he says, listen, you all miss it somehow. We all do. Because this group in the church in Hebrews, this congregation, we don't know how small it was, probably about between 60 and 100 people, not bigger than that. One of the congregations in Rome during the time of Nero's early persecution, they were afraid to gather to come to church, not because of COVID, but because of Nero and his spies and his army. Because the church held belief in the confession that Jesus Christ is Lord, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And Nero claimed that some titles for himself, the Son of God, God himself, the one who has the power and the right to rule. And therefore, anyone who does not bow or worship him and obey him in everything will be punished, excluded, even executed. So obviously there's a reason why these people there was a reason why they started looking for alternatives. Is there another way? Remember the story? Let me just tell the joke so you can get it. It's this man who walked on a cliff in Table Mountain. It's not a true story, but it can be a true story. And he walked on the cliff in Table Mountain, and as he was looking, it was a misty morning like this, and his foot slipped, and he fell down a cliff. And he grabbed a branch, some tree that was growing there, and he grabbed it, and it was grace, and he held onto it. But it was like 50 meters below him, 30 meters above from him, so it's like, it's not a good space. And then he started crying out, it's like, help! Help! Is there anyone out there? Help! And then he heard this voice from the clouds saying, I hear you, my son. Leave the branch. I will catch you. Trust me. And he thought for a while and he said, is there anyone else? It's the problem with the church in Hebrews. It's like, Is there anyone else? Is there a better, is there easier way? Is there more comfortable? Is there a way? I tell you my philosophy in life, no pain, no pain. They had this philosophy. Like, you will follow Jesus, you will be persecuted. Is there a way to life that is easy, that is acceptable culturally? And this was the issue. So, and they had the same problem. So they started looking into philosophy and their contemporary philosophy, thinking that the Greeks said that the Logos and the Sophia is a means to connect to God, to eternal life, to the blessed life, to salvation, you want to call it, to the good life. Please, when they thought about salvation, they were not thinking primarily, make it to heaven to sit on the clouds with Jesus. Not primarily, no? It's being set free from a life of corruption, evidenced in our everyday society. To be saved from sin and the power of sin, not just from the others, but me. My marriage struggles. I'm struggling with temptation. I mess up. I am unfaithful. I'm independable. I can't get it right. And no one else around me seems. And because of this, we have a governance system that is abusive because people serve themselves rather than others. They are loveless in themselves. So the idea is to be saved. Who will fix this? Who will fix this? Because we lived in the Garden of Eden long, long ago, and now we don't anymore. So how do we get back there? How do we live in shalom? We know what we want. We don't know how to get it. So that was the issue. So they looked at the Greek philosophy and Logos and Sophia, mediators between us and God, wisdom. They looked at the angels. The angels were mediators between God and man. Maybe we should venerate and worship angels because it was very popular in those days. Then they looked at Moses. Moses was someone who went on a mountain, heard from God, and came back and gave the law and saying, this is the way to life. He was the one who wielded God's power to save us from oppression, from Pharaoh and Egypt and the corrupt system of governance, enslavement. And he came back and he said, this is the way to life, this is the law, and this is the way to be right with God, this sacrificial system. And they go like, this will be helpful now. If someone like Moses would stand up and go to Nero and say, hey, Nero, God said, let my people go. Nero said, who do you think you are? And Moses would say, well, you can't touch this, And he would, lightning, goodness gracious lightning, great balls of fire, save them and take them back, give them back their land, and tell them this is the way to live. But then the whole book of Hebrews is the people saying, but maybe we should go back to that, to the angels or to Moses and just have another way of God. Anyway, but we have it in our hearts. We can see it in our own contemporary culture. We confess that Jesus is sufficient and Jesus is enough and Jesus is the Son of God and Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the most powerful one, the hope of glory. He's the bright morning star. We can confess everything we want, but in practice, like the Israelites, it's easier for us to go and say, Moses, you go up in the mountain and you talk to God. Because it's easier if you come back and you tell me what to do. We have this. We're looking for a mediator, someone else. You go and talk to God. You come back and tell us. It's easier for us to do that. It's easier for us to come to a great preacher and say, preacher, how then shall we live? And the preacher, you don't have to pray. You don't have to sit and wait on God. It's easier for me to just give you a summary, inspire you, give you 5 keys to a better marriage, 4 keys to financial freedom, and 3 keys to peace of heart and mind. And you go and you just go like, thank you for dumbing it down for me. I feel great. I don't know what this means, but amazing, It's like, so anyway, so this was them. They were in that issue. So then he lists in chapter 11 the heroes of the faith of Israel. The heroes of the faith, starting with Abraham, Jacob, Daniel, Moses, Samson, all of them. And after that he says, and all these people, it's the ESV version, and all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. Wow, this is like quite a statement, saying, especially if you wanted to trust in Moses, or Abraham or one of the others. If you want to follow this, he's saying that they were commended for their faith. They were people like me and you, normal people. They were commended for their faith, great examples. Wow. He's saying, but there's no way. They could not be made perfect. They can't make you perfect. Going back 2 weeks ago when we spoke about the law. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and every sin that clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before you. So if you missed this is some of you think in pictures. This will be distracting for a few seconds. But in the Roman world, in these days, the Olympians ran naked. They ran around naked so that nothing would weigh them down. Today, people run pretty much naked, no? It's just the clothes are quite tight and very little in the middle. So it's the same. They didn't want clothes because in those days the clothes were not Velcro and stretchy and sticky and stuff like that. So they ran and they said, well, let's rip it all off so I can run faster and not get entangled between my legs or my arms with a belt and stuff like that. So he's saying we should run the same way. Not like that, but we should run the same way. Run with endurance the race set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy was set before him, endured the cross, despised the shame, and was seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So he's saying, he brings in the metaphor of running to people who knew this metaphor of the Olympic race. And he's saying, people, we have other examples, but the reality is you have to run the race yourself. No one can run this race for you. And he's saying the danger of looking and following after another inspirational person, the danger is that they aren't made perfect and they aren't perfect themselves. So if you want to venerate them and if you want to follow after them, where they get stuck, you'll get stuck. Where they fall, you will fall. And I want to say we've all experienced something like this in the past where we were really let down or disappointed by some leader, and specifically church leaders. He's saying, keep your eyes on Jesus. He is the founder and the perfecter of our faith. I want to today bring this context and just frame it in 3 ways. The first thing is the call is to dealing with dead ends, I'm calling them. And because this church was sitting and they were, in a sense, stuck. They were in a dead end. They followed Jesus. They were following Jesus for a while. It's 60 AD. Many of them have been following Jesus for 15 years probably, since the gospel came to them. 15 years sitting in this church, trusting Jesus. Their fathers before them came through a severe persecution of Vespasian earlier. They've had a relative time of peace in 15 years. The church grew. They were not the only congregation in Rome, not the truest or the best one, but they were a congregation in Rome and had this character of being astute students of the Old Testament. And now especially since they started looking, because Judaism was allowed, so what's another way for us to serve Jesus that doesn't involve death? Let's just consider that one. And the author of Hebrews knew about this and wrote to them saying, listen, in a sense, you guys came to a bit of a dead end. And you're dealing with some form of disappointment. There's a disappointment. Your life following Jesus didn't turn out the way you thought it would. Jesus is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He is the true King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But at the moment, someone else who claims that name, Nero, is making life really difficult, impressive, and hard for you. It's painful. It's moeilijk. You thought that your life will be great, but at the moment you are poorer off than you were. You thought that if you serve the right king, the great king, the provider of all, that you will be blessed and rich. But at the moment you are suffering economically because you're excluded from society. And you don't have a freedom and a confidence to share with people with Jesus because you're going to invite people into church that is really harsh and difficult. It's difficult. It's hard for you. It didn't turn out the way. You have disappointments, and not just with people, but also with yourself. You've lived long enough to be disappointed with yourself. With you sitting in messes that you yourself made. No one else made them for you. You made them for yourself. Whether it's your marriage, whether it's economy, whether it's parenting, resentment between parents and children, sibling rivalry, friendships, just stuff that you're struggling with. You're struggling, you fall over the same trap over and over, and you're disappointed with yourself. So that's the key issue. The first one, and this is also the distractions. You guys are looking at other avenues. You stopped looking at Jesus who is your all-sufficiency. Love that song. You started looking at others. You started looking at studying the Logos and Sophia, Greek literature. How do we attain to spiritual salvation? What's the key to life? Studying that, looking into angel worship, looking into Moses, looking into the priesthood system, Levi, looking into other things that perhaps can yield better results for you at the moment, where your life will be more blessed because you feel, in a sense, you lack some great insight of some great truth, some power. So you look elsewhere and you start getting distracted. And we can see the same, with us, reading pop psychology, other literature, Eastern meditation stuff filled with New Age Eastern meditation. Things where you will feel, I don't really have the peace or the prosperity or the power that I want. So all these guys on YouTube, what are they teaching? Let me consider something else because I find a need and a lack that Jesus doesn't seem to fulfill. So let's do that, Let's seek other things. What are my friends doing that seems to work well? Goat yoga, things like that. It's grappig. It's like the craziest idea. Anyway, doubts. And this is what I love about this church. For every single one of us, there'll be a time in your life where your circumstance will prompt you to ask, is this what I've learned, and this what I confessed, and this what I sing really true? Because I'm praying, and I'm feeling I'm doing the right thing, but my life is not really going forward. I'm not really reigning in this life, as I understood Paul was saying. I'm struggling. This church was really struggling with their doubt, going like, is Jesus the only way? Because at the moment we've been praying and we've been in the, Nero is definitely winning. Really, Nero is definitely winning, Greek and Roman philosophy is really winning. And this almighty Jesus that we're worshiping, that we are losing this battle. We lost the city. I want you to think about it. It's election year again. And the prayers that we've prayed, how confident are you that Jesus really and the gospel is really sufficient to bring shalom in Cape Town? So this is what they were praying. Disappointments, distractions, doubts. And if you can identify with this, and you can identify with the readers. So the key, that window into God's reign, into God's kingdom, the key that the author of Hebrews was saying, he's saying, listen, guys, stop looking at all of these heroes. Stop looking at all of these avenues. I want you to focus your eyes on Jesus. I want you to see him, and I want you to lock eyes on him. And I want you, like a honing missile, just to stay behind him. Stay behind him. Because, and he says that he is the author and the finisher of our faith. And I love this. I really, really love this. He's the one who begins the story and the one who finishes your story. Then NIV says that he's the pioneer and perfecter. I love that. He's the one that broke the way, pioneered the way for your salvation. He made a way for you. He set a path for you where there was no path. And he's the perfecter, the one who fully matures or fully perfects that which he started. That means brings completion, brings glory, finishes it off, rounds it off. He doesn't just start something, but he also finishes it. And this church in Hebrews was exactly like the church in Galatia 15 years earlier, because they started in Jesus, and then they stopped and they said, well, there might be something else. We need to do something more, Add a bit of ceremony to Jesus, add a bit of things to Jesus, add a bit of meditation or contemplation, New Age stuff to Jesus. So I have to do more. And he's saying, no, not at all. He's the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. Same, another translation, the founder and perfecter, the ESV. And the New Living Translation, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. I love the word concept of champion there, because that's the champion that runs the race, that wins the race, who initiates and perfects. And this is the big thing that they're saying. He is the beginning and the end of your story of your salvation. He's the one who starts it and the one who finishes it. And before I continue, I really want you to think about something in your own life which is sort of a dead end. Because I can philosophically speak about Jesus as the beginning and end of everything. And you can go like, yeah, I'm sure he'll give me a key ticket to heaven. I got my passport. I'm going to make it. It's okay for me. But if you think of salvation and God's gift of life, not just in terms of making it one day when you die, make it there, but as something which God is building and perfecting in you to bring about the fullness of salvation to your life, wholeness, peace, fullness of life, shalom, the fullness of his kingdom in your life, where you can experience the fullness of the reign of God today and tomorrow. So I want you to think about something. Where's the dead end in your life? Because if you can read that, if you can keep that in front of your head, this will be helpful for you. Because then you can identify with the challenge of this church, but also the author of Hebrews' answer to your church, What is it that he does? And, whether it's your marriage, whether it's your finances, whether it's your neighbors, whether it's your just hope for life, whether it's addiction to something, a compulsion, your temper, your anger that destroys your life, the sense of always being right and know everyone else is wrong, and you can recognize after a few years that that's my issue. I'm always fighting, and everyone's always disappointing me because deep down I really think that I'm right and everyone else is wrong. It's less helpful. It's less helpful because that's the issue. He's saying that you're relying on yourself. You are the great example that you're following and not Jesus, and how's it working out for you? The question is, how's this working out for you? So, Jesus, the author and perfecter, just staying with that for a few seconds, the author in Philippians, Paul is writing and he's saying, listen, let's just get this straight. The next slide, please, Mackie. That I'm certain that God, who began the work within you, will continue his work until it is finally finished on the day when Jesus Christ returns. He's saying, I'm very confident that that which he began, he will also finish. En dis is my van die mooiste verse wat daar is. This is the baseline of what he's saying. He's the beginning and the end, the author and the perfecter, the founder and the completer of the work in you. The reality is that Jesus himself is the one who saves you. He says here, he began the good work in you. He will continue it until it's finally finished. So I want you to see three concepts of salvation here. It's the concept of liberation or justification, the fact that he saves you from something when you're born again. The concept of sanctification, making you holy and whole. And the concept of glorification, that when he comes back, you will be a final product. And he's saying that Jesus himself is the one who does this in you. That Jesus is the one who starts and finishes you. One of my biggest critiques of the evangelical culture that we are part of, and not the only one, and you will see it in all the literature that comes out. People, if the idea is that one day you stick up your hand in church or pray with a friend and saying, I confess all my sins, Jesus, just forgive me my sins and save me. And you go like, great, now I'm saved. I'm like, no, that's not the story of the Bible. That's the story of now you are born again into a life of continued salvation. But the truth is, it's not as though you are born again and you have to earn something for the rest of your life. I love what said Prof Henk Sturker that spoke on this. He spoke to him in the week, and he's saying that one of the greatest things that he tells the church, how do I prevent you from becoming a cultish environment? He's saying the gift is, you tell the people that the truth sets you free, not enslaves you to a program where you will never be sufficient. He's saying that Jesus Christ is enough. That by one sacrifice is perfected forever those who are being saved. Hebrews 10:10. Love that. I want you to think about that. By one sacrifice, he has perfected forever those who are being saved. It's a process. But the truth is, he's saying that he began a good work in you. He will continue it until he has finally finished it on the day when Jesus Christ returns. It's a life with God. It's an invitation to a life with God. And that's why he's saying to these people, listen, you have been saved. You knew it, you believed it, but now you're thinking, it's a bit too much effort and it doesn't really seem to work. What else can I do to help me along the path of perfection, of growing whole, of growing strong, of growing free? What else can bring me into this shalom, this kingdom of God, where things work? And they were looking at other ways, other great examples, other great philosophies, other great things. And the author of Hebrews saying, fix your eyes on him. Fix your eyes on him. What does 2 Corinthians chapter 3:18 say? It says, as we behold him, we're becoming like him, transformed from one degree of glory to the next. And this is by the indwelling Spirit of God who lives inside of us. As we behold him, we are being transformed into his image from one degree of glory to another. And this is of God. We get stuck when we take our eyes off Jesus. We get stuck when we forget that it's in fellowship with him, in relationship with our friend, in this covenant that he made with us, that we become like him. We get stuck if we forget that. We get stuck if we think it's some knowledge, some key, or someone else that brings about some transformation in us. We get stuck if we think something else can do it. We get stuck, not all the people. Most of the people that we see in relationship, you talk to them and you figure out, so what's happening? No, nothing. I'm stuck with this problem. I'm stuck. And it happens to all of us. We all get distracted. We all struggle with disillusionment and doubt, all of us. But every one of those conversations, people say, well, I'm struggling to have a vibrant relationship with Jesus. I don't have it. And I'm saying, so thankful that you're sitting in front of me now, because let's just have a meeting with Jesus now. I'm not here to give you some shumbai quotes that will give you some magic, because we want magic. Pray for me, Pastor. Magic, and it goes on. I'm like, no. I'd rather invite you into fellowship with the one and hold his hand. Fix your eyes on him. We're being transformed as we look to him. We're being transformed, whether it's you and yourself, whether it's your marriage, whether it's a porn addiction, whether it's a financial issue. The point is, it's him. It's him. He promises us peace. He promises us relationship with him. That he who began a good work will complete it until the way of Christ. And I want you to see all those three things. Justification, saved from my sin. Sanctification, constantly being shaped, polished, built up into the mirror image of Jesus. Glorification, when we see him. It's 1 John 3 verse 2. He says, we know that we are sons of God. We don't exactly know what we will be when we see him, but one thing we know, when we see him for who he is, we will become like him. How beautiful is that? It speaks about that moment of becoming like him once and for all the blemishes and stuff. Philippians chapter 2, he's saying, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. And then he just says it's the same thing. Because it's God who works in you, giving you the will to work for his good pleasure. The NIV says, giving you the will and the ability, the desire and the power to fulfill his will. But it's the same thing. It's he who works in you. It's he who starts this process that finishes it in you. One more verse, just could not put in these verses. Jude chapter 1 verse 24, one of the shortest books in the New Testament, in the Bible actually. Jude, the brother of Jesus, wrote this, and he's saying, God is able to keep you from falling away and will bring you with great joy into his glorious presence without a single fault. Hoe mooi is dit? Hoe mooi is dit? I mean, this apostle wrote the most encouraging words for you. Most encouraging words. And especially in those moments where you're so aware of the stuff that you always trip over. Die hele tyd. Whatever your problem is. Those areas where you constantly mess up, fall over. Those areas where you constantly just seem to fall into the old self, or you've never been able to overcome this one thing. It brings you to a point of hopelessness, Wanneer gaan ek nou ooit hierdie reg kry? Wanneer gaan ek nou ooit hierdie reg kry? And his answer to the church, and this is 45 after Christ, hard time in Jerusalem. He's writing to the church saying that God is able. God has the power. God has the ability. God himself has the... You don't. God has the ability to keep you from falling. To keep you from falling. He has it. Don't bank on your own effort. He is it. Hold his hand. Walk with him. Just keep his hand. He's able to keep you from falling. And he will bring you with great joy. I love this, with great joy. It's the Greek, that's why some of the translations read like this. Puts it in the center of the sentence. Great joy. Ni depression, not struggle. Great joy, celebration. Into his glorious presence. And I love this, without a single fault. What a promise. What a promise of life with God. Of life with God. We have examples of people like that, older people, that are just gracious, kind, simple, not easily intimidated, not easily impressed by worldly things, not distracted. But people who have walked with Jesus for a very long time, who just love, kind, patient, content, not anxious, not fearful, simple joy, deep, simple joy, aware of all the world's problems. They've lived the odd 70 years, but just a deep sense of peace and joy. Why? Because of him who is able to keep them from falling and to present them spotless. It's a journey of grace. It's a journey of grace. Remember the temptation that Jesus said when the sower of seed sowed seed? And he's saying the second one, throwing it among the rocks. There's a danger of responding too quickly to this promise of Jesus, but when trials, temptations, and tribulations, biblical words, when hard times come, the Bible says they shrink quickly because they don't have a deep root. And the invitation is just to, guys, deep roots, long obedience in the same direction. The invitation is a long obedience in the same direction. A long obedience in the same direction. Walk with him, hold his hand, because he is able. The power belongs to him, not to me. To cleanse me from my faults, because he's able to cleanse me from my faults. He's able to make me not trip over. His grace is sufficient. It's enough. It really is enough. So, invitation, what is the door for us in this text? And I'm going to highlight a few things. Just want to read it through so you can see it with me. I mean, the text says, keep your eyes on Jesus. That's the impetus. It's the call. Don't look to other stuff. Don't look to other people. They will let you down. You know, the great apologist who he's dead and now he figured out, oh, this man, you know, was just an immoral person, didn't have power over his great brain, but didn't have the power over his own fleshly desires. If you don't know who I'm talking about, it's fine, you know. Or you look at someone else who had this great revival sustained for 30 years in his church, and 2 weeks ago, there was a testimonial that came out again of Matt Redman. It just says that, man, that guy has great ability to preach, but when the doors are closed, he does very bad things to younger people, you know. And we lose faith in Jesus because his great preachers seem to fail. And Jesus says, no, don't do that. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Just keep it on him. And the invitation is, in this context, is in the inner room and in the public. Just consider him. The invitation is to lighten your load. I love it. So throw everything off. Run naked. Run without pretense. Run without flashiness. You know, you want to run with great clothes so you can pretend to be good. You know, put on some reputation. Put on something. He says, no, just have a simple life. Let everyone see who you really are. Just don't pretend. Oh, yes, I'm the great pretender. You know, don't do that pretender thing. Freddie Mercury. Just run, throw off everything without any pretense, without any cool tools or cool stuff. Simplify your life. Run the race as you just keep it on him. Don't try to impress people. Just follow Jesus. And then the big thing here, and this is my invitation. I've got 2 invitations today. The first invitation, firstly, is to not quit. If you're in church today, and you are stuck with something, and you have been stuck for a long time, I want to invite you just to look at the author of Hebrews saying to people, hey, you're at the dead end again, alweer. You're in this wall again. You're here where you are again. You thought you were going forward, but this road, you're stuck in a maze. It's not going where you thought it's going to go. My call for you is to not lose heart, but to look at him. Because this church was starting to look at other stuff. They said, well, what I thought about the life of God is not going to take me there. And the author of Hebrews is saying it definitely will. You're at a dead end now. Just stop and look at Jesus. Stand still, close your eyes, look at Jesus. Look at him. Look at his face who delights in you. Look at him who has accepted you. Look at him who cleanses you. Look at him who says that I have made a way for you into the throne room of grace that you may abound in grace. I've paved a way for you. My grace is sufficient for you. Just for today. Just come to me with your burden, with your fear, with your anxiety, with your helplessness, and just look at me. Do not look elsewhere, because he says, I am able to keep you from falling and to present you spotless with exceeding joy. Don't quit. Let me just read that text for you. He says, I see that I deleted the text. Oh no, I got it right. He says, let us throw off everything that hinders and so easily entangles us. Let us race with, the perseverance, the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. He says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured so much opposition, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. The invitation is to not give up, to not stop, to not back down, to not stop trusting God for his salvation in fullness in you. Do not stop trusting God that he will make a way where there seems to be no way. Do not think that God will write you off, because that's the big thing that we believe in the end. If we constantly trip over the same sin the whole time, what happens in the end is we think that God is he's going to give up on us. He's going to back down. He's going to say, well, I tried with you. Or you think worse, that God is just going to leave you where you are now, and this will be your life always. Disillusionment leads to, discontentment leads to disillusionment. You will stay here. He will keep you here. You'll be a great disappointment forever, and that will be it. But he's saying no, that he who began a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. Look to him. Fix your eyes on him. His grace is sufficient. Hold on to him. As you behold him, you are being transformed into one degree of glory to the next. It's not a one instant, big moment thing, but there is something. It's a constant thing. And then the last invitation for you is to not rely on yourself. Don't rely on others. Don't look at John G. Lake. Just please don't look at Apostle Ross van Niekerk. Don't look at, some stupid title with some big name, thinking that this guy has all the keys that I need. He's saying, no, you won't. Fix your eyes on Jesus. The goal of the church is not to fix your eyes on some great preacher or some great knowledge or some great amazing worship leader. The goal of the church is to gather in the name of Jesus and look to Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. So don't look on people, but then he says specifically, don't just isolate yourself, because that's the other dumb thing that happens. When we look at the cults this week again, in the episodes, you'll see that all of them have a tendency to isolate you from everything else and make you dependent on some person with the truth. Now, the one thing that we would want to do is, when we get hurt in a system of church or a system of leadership or society, is we would like to step away from everyone else, because churches inherently are flawed. Congregations are flawed. Gatherings, leaders are flawed. Absolutely right. But I love what he says here. The author says in Hebrews 10:24 to 25, just a few verses earlier from where we picked up the conversation, he's saying, no, I want you to gather with one purpose. I want you to not stop gathering. I mean, that's just hectic. You just have to I say it every time. But these people were in danger of losing their lives, being imprisoned, and losing everything when they come to church. And he's saying to them, You will not come to church. You will come to church. You will gather. You will not stop gathering. You will gather. Because you need it. At the moment, things are hard for you. So he's saying, for God's sake, gather. But this is what you do when you gather. He said, why do we gather? We gather to spur one another on to love and great works. All the translations reads. He's saying, I want you to consider how we may spur one another on to love work and good works. You've heard me say this 50 times, but the word consider is the Greek word for kataneo. It's a Greek word for die denker, the thinker. Literally, to put down your head in thinking, saying deep thought, deep consideration. How can I help Willem to spur him to character transformation, to be a more loving person like Jesus? What is Jesus like? How can I help Willem to become a more loving person? And secondly, he's saying to spur him on to good works. How can I help Willem to do as Jesus did? To not live for himself, but for others. To live a selfless love. To be more effective in witnessing. So be more effective in transforming into the image of Jesus and be more effective in living like Jesus does. This is really the invitation. He's saying, don't isolate yourself. When things are difficult, when you trap over the same thing, when you feel you just don't make it, he's saying, I want you to come like these athletes, untangled and simple. Don't hide, don't pretend, just come. But when you come, just recognize that everyone around you is imperfect and growing in the grace of Jesus. So when you come, consider how to spur one another to love and good works. Don't just live for yourself. Don't be stuck in your own problems. Don't be fixated in your own problems. He's saying church is all about gathering in the name of Jesus. Don't isolate. Yes, we are flawed. But we come together for a meeting with Jesus. You heard the same. Goeie genigtig. 8 times op. Ek moet nou stop. I'm going to hurt myself. You heard me say this 50 times, and I started it in the same way. But I want you to do it when you go to your small group as well. I want you to do it when you go to your grow group. I want you to do it when you walk into this church. Maybe for a season we can just put the sticker somewhere, Yana, or just something. Just remind us this is not a meeting about Jesus. This is a meeting with Jesus. We are here to fix our eyes on Jesus. Do not be impressed by someone's something, whether it's the singing or with the preaching or the testimony, but we're here to fix our eyes on Jesus. We come like athletes, throwing off all the pretense and all the tools and all the kits. We come for a meeting with Jesus. And when we feel down, when we feel hopeless, when we feel at the dead end, we just fix our eyes on Jesus, who has begun this work in salvation in us, who is busy at present sanctifying us, and who promises to complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. He's laying hold on you. It's not about your performance. It's not about your ability to keep it right, to get it right. It's not going to impress him. He's the one who starts it, and he's the one who finishes it. And that's amazing. So someone said to me, they're concerned about their children or families in other churches that were highlighted. I just want you to keep this in mind as well. As long as your friends and your family keep their eyes on Jesus, they will be transformed into his image. Even if this church is flawed, it is. Even if this church is flawed, I want you to know that as you fix your eyes on Jesus, he's the one who starts and finishes the work in you. He's laid hold of you. He's not going to drop you. He's not going to leave you. Your invitation is to lay hold of him. So last words before we pray. Nearly every single person that we as a wellness team work with and pray with that gets stuck at some point, come to a wit's end and decide, I don't have money to go to a psychologist, I'm going to see someone at church. Ne? It's great. It's good. You know? It's because they do not have a habit of locking eyes with Jesus. They don't have the habit or they don't have the skill to lock eyes with Jesus. I bet there are one or two people like that in the congregation here today who don't have a habit of locking eyes with Jesus. And at the moment, you're just trying harder to keep it all together, more effort, focusing more, Or maybe your prayer life is just a way to pray, God, just help me not fail, go on, I want to invite you now for a moment. I want to ask Greg to come forward and to lead us into worship. I want to invite you just to take this moment now to again lock eyes with Jesus. To look to Jesus. I want you to do it in the reality of an athlete, figuratively. Just lay off every weight and also the sin that entangles us. Lay all the worries, lay all the pretenses, lay everything down. And I want you in this moment just to take a look in Jesus in the eye. And you're welcome just to unburden yourself in his presence, or if you're just happy, just to look at him, to consider him. Who is this great Savior who loved you so much, who left everything to come and save you? Who is this man who loved and forgave and, taught us to follow him in the way of God? Who is this great King, this great Savior of the world who loved us so much that he left everything to come and get us? Why would you think he would drop you today? Why would you think he would drop you today? Why would you think he who left his throne to come to give himself to bleed out for you in all the shame and the pain? Why would you think he would leave you? Just for a moment, let's just keep our eyes on Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith.